What's up everyone, Lance Hedrick here. Now, you just opened your Meticulous, you've got a new machine, and you want to know how to use it. Well, we're doing a series right here that's going to help you, guide you through the process of how to make the perfect espresso for you. Now, in this first video, we're just going to jump straight to pulling some shots that I think everyone can enjoy. So this is a no frills, just dialing in 2 different coffees on your espresso machine. But in this series, we're going to cover a plethora of different topics, including extraction theory in general, how we can understand different variables of extraction, what profiles are, what they mean, how you can make your profile work for you and the coffees you enjoy, the grinder you might have, and more. So stick around, check out other videos if that interests you. But for those of you that just want to get your shot and move on, let's get started. So in this video, I have 2 coffees I've chosen. First is representative of like a medium or dark roasted coffee. This is from my friends at Cafe Macher. It's the Toca, a Mexican coffee. It's rated 5 out of 6 on their dark scale. So pretty darkly roasted, not oily covered, not coated like that, but it's a pretty well-developed coffee. The other one is from Roasticious. This one is an Idito. It's an Ethiopia landrace coffee that's natural yeast fermentation process. And so we'll use this for kind of our light roast option. Now, the profile I'm going to be using today is one that I recommend you all use if you're just wanting to get a shot, you aren't positive of your dial in, or it's something that you can, really focus a lot of attention on and dial in. So without getting into the theory behind this espresso shot, we're just going to dial in and we'll get into the theory behind it later into a different video. But today we're just going to get you dialed in on this profile. It's a very, 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 very forgiving profile, something I believe a lot in and something I think just makes great espresso regardless of the roast level and regardless of your grinder. Today I'll be brewing the lighter roasted coffee on a P64. This is a grinder that has 64 millimeter SSP multi-purpose burrs. They're known to be a bit less fines producing, which match well with lighter roasted coffees where people might want to emphasize clarity in their espresso. And then for the darker roasted one, I'll be using the Niche 0, which is a way more bimodal grinder, meaning there is a bigger kind of hump of fines and a bit more varied particle peak, this is just to show you kind of different examples of what you might get. So if you're at home and you have something like a conical grinder, it might behave similarly to this Niche. If you have something touted as a higher clarity grinder, it might behave similarly to something like this P64. Without further ado, let's start pulling shots. We're going to start with the Cafe Macher. All right, so with this, I'm going to just choose a random grind size. We're just going to grind up beans and we're going to try. So what you need with espresso, very simply put, you need your beans, you need a capable grinder, you need your portafilter with a basket inside. This is kind of what acts as our filter, right? It's what filters out the coffee. We need a tamper, and then I like to use this kind of collar. Sits around so it's easier to dump the grounds in. So with that, we're able to kind of get started. Now, what I like to do is I like to go ahead and get my water in the machine to start heating. So very simple to do that. The recipe we're using today, if we start our machine, it's called the Simple. Now, this has been the Italian style that comes with the machines. I've recently made some changes to it, and I'm just calling it the Simple because I think it's a bigger kind of generalized shot than just mimicking Italian, because it doesn't really do that. So it's just the Simple. We click on that, and then I have water that's been preheated, so I'm going to go ahead and pour that in. And this is my workflow. I like to go ahead and get this started heating up and allow it to kind of equalize at the temperature that we're needing. Now with this profile, there's no need for you to go in and change anything. You can do any roast profile with this and get a solid shot. So we're just going to let this heat up to the temperature. Don't worry about the temperature. Again, we're just trying to get a shot that tastes good. So the first thing I'm going to do is, since I have a 20 gram basket, and that refers mostly to the depth, you could actually fit 22 grams of some coffees in here, 18 grams of other coffees. It's just referring to the depth. I found that with this coffee, I like about 20 grams. So it just so happens to match the rated size of the basket. But anyway, we're going to take a dose cup. I'm going to use the scale that's built into the machine. So I'm just going to hold down this side button, and there comes the scale. I'm going to tear it. We're going to weigh up 20 grams. So we've got 20 grams of this weigh. Now I'm just going to open up the Niche. We'll put it on, I don't know, around 14. We're just going to see what happens there. Plop that in, start grinding. All right, now when you select your initial grind size, I would recommend grinding a little bit and then kind of feeling with your fingers where it's at. If it feels like powder, like when you're rolling it around your fingers and it feels like powder, that is much too fine. You always want to start coarser than finer. When you go from coarse to fine, it's much easier to find your bearings than if you start too fine and try to get your way out of it. You're lost in a maze when you start too fine. So I like to go in there and I like to feel it. And like, you should be able to kind of hear the grittiness of it. You don't want it to be like salt, like table salt. You don't want it to be crazy big, but you do want to be able to have a little bit of that kind of coarseness about it. Now, one thing that I always try to tell people is when they coarse them in their hand, if you pinch it, it should be able to sort of keep its peak, but if you can see your fingerprints in it, you've gone too fine. So that's kind of a simple little test that you can do. Grind a couple of beans and see where you're at. Now, this isn't going to get you directly to where you need to be because different grinders are going to require different grind sizes based off of the particle size distribution they get. We won't get into that. That's just a teaser for a future video, but just know that the kind of grind size that you're going on with the niche will be completely different than what is needed with the P64 if we're doing the same exact recipe. The overall particle peak, like essentially what grind size you're at with the P64, will need to be finer because it produces less fines on the low end of things. So little teaser, learn about grinders, but we'll continue on with what we have. So I've started with just a random grind size. I don't know if this is going to work. We're going to take our portafilter, put the funnel on, and then I'm just going to dub this in. Now, of course, you can play around with puck prep. You can use WDT. You can do a lot of other things. But what I've found over the years is for most beginners, adding a ton of these steps is actually making it a lot more difficult to get a good shot than making it easier. So if you're just kind of just starting, dump the coffee in, give a few taps on the side, and make sure it's as level as possible. If there are a couple of clumps like this, it's not the end of the world. It's not going to greatly skew everything. You can still get good shots like this. It's just not going to be ideal, and you can get better at it over time. That being said, I do think a lot of times people overcomplicate their putt prep. So don't overcomplicate it. Get the grounds in there and get going. So we have it somewhat level, and we're going to tamp down. You want to tamp until essentially those grounds are pushing back at you. You don't need to overdo it. If you're putting all of your weight into it, you're going over the top, you're going to cause inconsistencies. Just focus on it being a level tamp and push until it pushes back at you. You don't feel any more of that kind of squeeze. Once it's all good, ready to go, we're going to load it in the machine, which is now with temperature. Lock it in. And just so you know, you don't need to yank it all in. Go until it's nice and tight. Hold the machine like so that it doesn't go anywhere. And just kind of lock it in. Good to go. And now, we're going to pull our shot. So put the cup on the little marking square so you know you're right below the portafilter. So we saw the scale up. We're just going to double click the side button and boom. Now we're ready to go. It's at temperature. We just click push to brew. So the piston is raising up. Valve is going to open up and the water's going to flood over the top of the puck. Now all of these dynamics we'll discuss again in further videos on why it's different than a normal machine. But for now, we're just going to see how this is extracting. So it comes down. Okay. The pressure is rising. We're going up. It's actually coming out pretty decently. And the pressure peaked at about 3 bar. Okay. But as you see, it's not flying out like crazy. Okay. This is a very important thing to see. This is why this profile is so forgiving. It actually seems that our grind size is a bit too coarse. With a darker roasted coffee, I'd like to see it peak more around 6, 7, maybe 8 bar of pressure, but this one only peaked around 3. Now, once the shot is done, you still have some water left in the tank. You want to get that going, so we're just going to purge it into a cup. Now, the purpose of this profile is to be as forgiving as possible. You start off with a pretty gentle saturation of the puck with about 50 or 60% power from the piston, just trying to really push water into that puck. And then it switches to a flow first profile where it's just doing around 1.8 to 2 milliliters a second. Now, the reason for this is once you have reached pressure, it is not going to be able to increase the flow rate once you've hit a threshold of pressure. The flow rate is going to be the flow rate that's exiting. So the goal is at 1.8. Now, as the shot goes on and you lose solubles in the puck and it being Soro, it's going to lessen the pressure. Okay, so what we see here is we never actually built that much pressure. It started off going to 3.2 grams a second for the flow rate, but then it dipped down. And then when it hit our kind of average of 1.7, 1.8, you see the pressure here didn't get above 3.3 bar. 3.4 bar was the peak. So we know that we didn't grind fine enough. It's not going to allow us to build more pressure if we don't have more resistance. Does that make sense? We have pressure equals resistance times the input flow. So we need to increase the resistance because I'm not increasing the input flow. That 1.8 mils a second is roughly equivalent to what you would see on a dialed in spring lever machine. So what we're trying to do here is allow for a natural declination of pressure over time. But what it also allows for is proper contact time, even if you're too coarse on the grind size. So for this one, we're quite coarse. We didn't reach above 3.4 bar. That's okay, because we still had about a 22, 23 second shot, which is pretty good contact time, even if you're too coarse. In fact, this may be the way you enjoy drinking it more than a higher pressure. High pressure does not mean better espresso. This is a fallacy that has been somehow understood over the years where it was never really preached. So let's go and take a sip of this, see how it tastes. It's actually really nice. This is the first time I've had this coffee, so we'll go finer and see if with a higher pressure it tastes better. But right now, for as dark of a roast it is, it's actually pretty juicy. It's got a really nice acidity to it, even though it's a darker roast. It's a solid coffee. You got some dark chocolate in there, you've got some clove and spices, but there's also kind of like a juicy malic acidity for what it is. It's obviously not comparable to some sort of white roast, but regardless, it's a solid coffee. So now that we've done that first shot, we're going to make the change. We're going to go finer, and this is going to cause a higher resistance in the puck, which is going to cause a higher pressure, right? Even at the same flow rate, we'll have a higher pressure because we're giving it more resistance, so it's going to cause more pushing to get the water through. So I'm going to go down a couple of clicks, and then we're going to run this again. So let me go ahead and clean up the portafilter, and we'll get going. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do the thing I do. We've got my kettle warmed with warm water. We're going to go ahead and get off the scale. There we are. I'm going to pour water in here. And then we're going to hold this to start heating it. There we go. So this is going to sit over here and get to its proper temperature. I've got the coffee. I've gone a couple of ticks finer. Now, something that can happen here is we could have the same exact shot time, even though we're going 2 ticks finer. That's not necessarily what's going to happen. If we went too fine, the shot would be even longer than before because it will max out on pressure and the flow rate can't be as high. That resistance will also dictate the flow rate based off of the pressure wave it's set at. So if it hits 9 bar on this next one and the flow rate is not able to escape at 1.8 or so, then it's going to be a slower shot because it may be coming out at 1 millisecond. So what I'm trying to say is, with varying grind sizes, for the most part, if you're in a good ballpark, you should have same shot times and just different pressure profiles that are going on. We are not basing this profile off of pressure. Pressure is a byproduct, and a lot of times it's a red herring. In fact, the only sensory studies that I'm aware of that actually tested pressure and the effects on taste showed that there were no discernible effects unless you went over 3 bar of pressure in the differences between your shots. But anyway, let's get this going. Now again, just kind of tapping it to make sure it's nice and level. Then we're going to tamp flat until it stops pushing against us. And there we go. Now, of course, you could put a mesh screen on top, which I do pretty often. It always helps whenever it helps with cleanliness, though this does not suck water up because it's a piston again, future videos. But that is something you can do, but we're obviously raw dogging it. So let's get this in there. Just till it stops moving. Cup in place. And now we're 2 degrees away from target. I'm impatient. I'm going to go ahead and brew now. So we're going to do that. Now, 2 degrees is not going to cause an appreciable difference on the cup quality. I'm saying that. All right, and here we go. Drop the water in. Pressure is at, oh, it's building. We're going up. Now we're at 5, we're at 6, we're at 7, we're at 8. All right. And now the flow is only at 1.3, 1.4, 1.5. So this will be a little longer of a shot than the previous one, but not by much. You see, the pressure is dipping because the flow rate is constant. As we're losing integrity of that puck, there's not as much resistance. So as that puck resistance is waning, the flow rate is increasing until it hits our cap, our limit of 1.8. And so the pressure necessarily has to go down. So again, if we look at that equation, we have pressure equals resistance times input flow. If the input flow is the same, but the resistance is decreasing, since that is a product, that this times this equals pressure, if one of the two in the product goes down, necessarily the pressure must also go down. So as resistance is going down, the pressure reacts accordingly. So we peaked up at like 8 or 8.5 bar, but by the end of the shot, it was at 3. I did not profile the pressure on this. If you look at the profile at the simple, it is strictly a power and then a flow profile, meaning we just talked about the piston power to saturate the puck, and then it's just flow for the entirety of it. And it's just a static flow. But anyway, let's go ahead and pull this off. Again, purging out the water, just like so. And we have our graph. So if we look at the graph, we start off, it goes up to about 10.7 of flow. All right, this is at the beginning when it's saturating the puck. And so at the beginning, I don't have a limit except about 10 grams a second for the flow rate. There's no real limit on what it needs to do during that initial fill rate. So during the saturation, I do want it to be more gentle. The harder you saturate that puck, you hammer it, the more compressed it gets, the harder it is for water to get through. So I do it a little gently, but then after that, it switches to flow first. The flow dipped to 1.5, 1.6, but as pressure began to build, it realized, oh my, this is actually pretty difficult to get through. We're going to shoot as much water as we can without exceeding your 8.5 or so pressure threshold, which was around 1 millisecond. But then as time went on, that flow increased because it was set to 1.8, and it finally hit 1.8. And so the pressure began to decline, though, because we were losing resistance in the puck, and that gave us our shot. And overall, that gave us about a 28-second shot. So a few seconds longer than the previous shot, which is much more in the realm of what this is built to make. So something that peaks and then declines the pressure over time, which not only gives you a lot of forgiveness on the grind size, because again, if you don't hit 8 bar, you'll still get a 25-second shot, but it also will allow you to have less heterogeneous flow through that puck near the end. Think about it. As that puck is weakening, we're obviously dissolving part of the puck into our cup. So near the end of a shot, 20% of that puck is gone, right? So we're pulling, if we had a 20-gram puck and 20% of it's gone by the end, that means there's 16 grams left in here if we're dehydrated. So now we're on a normal espresso machine, we're putting faster and faster water through a weaker and weaker puck. That's counterintuitive. When it's a weaker puck, it's not going to be able to maintain its shape, maintain its stature as well with a faster flow. We would want a slower flow, right? So the idea of this is to reduce the pressure and maintain a low flow so that by the end, you're not getting crazy channeling or things like that. But anyway, let's take a sip, see if it improved. The acidity on this is actually way more intense than on the previous cup, which I still have a little bit left here. Honestly, this one is a bit I guess you could say smoother. I think a lot of that's because we weren't as fine, so we weren't exposing as much surface area. It's difficult to say on the extraction. I mean, we could measure extraction, but there's no real need in this video because we're going off taste, right? So for me, I would say probably the more enjoyable shot between these two was actually the one that didn't peak as high as in pressure. But some of you may prefer the one that has a bit more of that acidity presentation on it. But the idea with this type of profile is that it is super forgiving, and you can find with just a couple of ticks on the grinder, way different shots without being kind of boxed in. On a normal 9-bar, flat 9-bar machine, you have a constant water debit from the pump. You have the desire of the machine to hit 9 bar. It diverts any water if it's going over 9 bar. But then at the end, whenever it's lost resistance, that flow rate can go through the roof. And so you're essentially dialing in around the potential downfalls of that style of shot. With this, however, you have loads of different styles of shots that can come out naturally based off of the resistance of your puck. So by playing around with your grind size, playing around with the grinder, the water temp, all these things, you have loads of variables on one recipe, which is absolutely fantastic. Now, as you saw, pretty easy. I just went on the coarser side and then I went finer in order to get kind of the ideal shot, which with this, what I mean by ideal is what it was designed initially to do, which is to give you kind of an 8-9 bar peak, and then it descends as the shot goes on. That's kind of what it's kind of made for. Now, if we were to go finer, it would maintain 8.5 bar the whole time, right? Right? Because if it's a 1.8 max, if we grind fine enough to where 1.8 mils a second cannot exit then it's going to maintain that 8 bar because it's going to push as hard as it can to the limit I have set. Again, don't worry about these limits. Just understand this profile. So this is dialed in for me. I prefer the first one. I'd probably go a little coarser, not allow it to actually hit that pressure. But the ideal shot with this, quote unquote, is this higher pressure and then declination. But let's move on to the light roast and do the same thing.